Well, hello and welcome to our invasive species and iMapInvasives training. Thank you for coming. I'm Bill Jacobs. I'm the program manager for the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area, and I'm joined today by Melody Cerniglia, our early detection and rapid response manager, Abby Marino, our conservation area manager, and Cassidy Robinson, our education and outreach manager. Well, let's start with a definition of invasive species. Invasive species is one that is not native to an ecosystem and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause harm to the economy, to the environment, or to human health. Usually an invasive species is introduced by people, either intentionally or accidentally. Not all non-native species are invasive. Most non-native species are beneficial. For example, broccoli. Broccoli is not native, but it's also not invasive. But a small number of non-native species escape cultivation and become invasive in natural areas. Let's look briefly at who we are, the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area. LIISMA is a partnership of organizations working together to reduce the threat of invasive species and protect local ecosystems in parts of New York City and on Long Island. And major funding for LIISMA is provided by the New York State Environmental Protection Fund, as administered by the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation. And we are hosted by the Long Island nonprofit, the Long Island Native Plant Initiative. LIISMA is one of 8 regional partnerships that manage invasive species in New York State. And our goal is to protect and restore Long Island's and New York City's most important ecosystems. Like this in the image here, this is Calverton Ponds Preserve, a coastal plain ponds that harbors a high concentration of rare plants, animals, and ecological communities. It's interesting to note that Long Island is one of the most biologically diverse regions of New York State. Some people are surprised to hear that, but we have a high concentration, again, in various places on the island of rare plants and animals. Some of them are globally rare as well, such as the dwarf pine plains out in the West Hampton area. We have so many invasive species, more than 600. We have many sites to manage, so it's very important that we prioritize our work. And we prioritize primarily 2 ways: by invasive species and also by the conservation areas that we seek to protect. We have several priority conservation areas. These are some of them: the Islip Greenbelt, Fire Island Wilderness, the Long Island Central Pine Barrens, out of the Northwest Peninsula, Long Pond Greenbelt, and then out to Montauk. So these are some of our larger priority conservation areas. We have smaller natural heritage sites, such as the Hempstead Plains. This is the invasion curve, which shows the establishment of invasive species over time. So on the lower left, there is the introduction of an invasive species. The idea of this is to try to control and even eradicate, if possible, emerging invasive species, new invasive species when they're just getting started. And as time goes on, as the graph moves to the right, it becomes more and more unlikely that an invasive species can be eradicated or even managed. And it becomes very difficult once invasive species populations become very large. So we try to find populations when they're very small and emerging. And this is where you come in, especially. We want community scientists on Long Island to use iMapInvasives and iNaturalist, and we'll talk about both of those. Most especially to find emerging invasive species that haven't really taken off yet and taken over. I mentioned prioritization. New York State and the region, Long Island region, has a prioritized list of invasive species, which you can find online. We rank species by their ecological impact and economic impact. You see that on the top left there. If there are high impacts in the top center, then we look at the distribution and the number of occurrences of a species, and we put them into various tiers. So if you move down to the lower right, that's tier 1. That's a species that's not yet present on Long Island, but it's in a buffer area, somewhere relatively close to the island. Tier 2, too far. Yeah. All right, tier 2 right here, if you can see the cursor. Low abundant species, 10 or fewer populations. That's tier 2. We can still eradicate those. In other words, we can eliminate those, we hope, from Long Island completely, if there are 10 or fewer populations. As there's greater than 10 in number, they become more widespread. These are tier 3 species, which we try to contain to wherever they might be so that they don't escape into new areas. Tier 4 is local control. These are well-established species that are common on Long Island, and we can only control them at specific sites when there's a specific conservation target that we're trying to protect, like a rare ecological community. So that's local control. Tier 5, which is also called Tier M, those are species we're not sure of their ecological impacts yet, so we're monitoring those, and we have a whole bunch of those that we monitor. Here's the tier ranking list, which you can find online. You can scan this with your phone, or you can go to Google, and if you type in something like New York invasive species tier list, you'll get the site. It's managed by the New York Natural Heritage Program and the DEC. So this will list all the invasive species, and there's a link. It will show you where they occur and what their priority rank is, what their tier rank is. Again, if you Google invasive species tier rank New York, you should get to this list if you're interested.
Hey, thanks, Bill. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about invasive species, what makes them invasive, and why it matters. By the way, I'm Melody Triniglia, and I'm our early detection and rapid response manager, as Bill mentioned before. So first, we're going to talk about native, non-native, and invasive species. So native species have developed a mutualistic relationship with their environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The species and their habitats have worked together to create a relationship in which each benefits from the other. Non-native species are introduced species that are new to a given habitat or ecosystem. They're plants and animals living in areas where they do not naturally exist. They can have a beneficial effect on the environment, or they can exist neutrally, neither harming nor benefiting the ecosystems that they're growing in. Non-native species and invasive species cannot be used interchangeably, though. However, an invasive species is a non-native species that is able to establish and reproduce itself in many different sites to the point where the species is disrupting or degrading local ecosystems, harming recreation and the economy, and sometimes even human health. Okay, so let's talk about how they spread. Invasive species are spread primarily by human activities, often unintended. People and goods travel quickly around the world, and they often carry uninvited guests with them. Invasive species can be introduced to an area by transportation vessels, firewood, animals, accidental release, and by people. Insects can be transported easily in wood, shipping pallets, and crates. Ornamental plants can sometimes become invasive after escaping cultivation into the wild. Released unwanted pets are another way that invasive species can be spread as well. Okay, the impacts of invasive species. For those of For those of us working in ecology and related fields, the most important impacts of invasive species are the ecological ones. Increased competition for resources leads to degradation of habitats, which eventually leads to an overall decrease in biodiversity and resilience of these ecosystems. Ecologically important places like forests, grasslands, wetlands, and water bodies can become weakened and damaged. This is especially important in regards to the protection of ecologically rare and endangered species because a lack of resilience means that these species might not come back. Also, for many people, especially landowners and recreationists, economic damage can be a huge issue as well. Invasive species can destroy foundations, impede recreation like fishing, kayaking, and navigating waterways. It can damage agriculture, as is the case with spotted lanternfly currently. And over time, it can become costly issues for landowners. So, why does it matter? Well, invasive species touch nearly every aspect of our world, and they're one of the greatest threats to New York's biodiversity, agriculture, and outdoor recreation. So now I'm going to pass the mic over to Cassidy to talk about species identification tools, techniques, and applications.
Thanks, Melody. Hello, everyone. Once again, I'm Cassidy. I'm LIISMA's Education and Outreach Manager, and we're going to get into, before we can learn to map invasive species, we're going to go through some tips and tools for identifying them. So there are several apps and websites you can refer to guide you on your journey of learning plant and animal identification. These include iNaturalist, Seek, Picture This, and GoBotany. GoBotany is a field guide like Dichotomous Key, while the other apps are apps and websites that use a combination of AI and community expert review to suggest species ID. We recommend using more than one of these tools simultaneously to confirm ID, since each is not 100% accurate on its own. Let's dive a bit deeper on one of our favorite tools, iNaturalist. iNaturalist is an online social network of people sharing biodiversity information and recording observations of plants and animal species using a smartphone. You can use iNaturalist by uploading multiple photos of a species, which might include flowers, leaves, buds, and other plant parts. From there, you can manually enter a species ID, view and add AI-suggested identification, or leave the species blank for the community to decide. Oftentimes, experts and enthusiasts will review your observations, add ID, and confirm or update what you've suggested. With enough community input, your reports can become research-grade. These research-grade observations help professionals like LIISMA as we look over records on iNaturalist for presence of emerging invasive species, which informs where we dedicate our efforts. So your inputs are very important to us. So in addition to IMAP, we encourage you to use iNaturalist. You can learn more about the plants and animals you've observed, or any species on iNaturalist, like its seasonality or chronology, life history, distribution, and other key ID factors. In order to effectively identify, observe, and report invasive species, it's necessary to take good photos to properly capture key ID characteristics of a species. This doesn't mean you need a fancy camera. You just need to follow a few simple steps to make sure your photos allow for accurate species identification and don't look like these. Most of the photos above come from the iNaturalist Unidentified Species page. It can be difficult to capture a good photo of a plant, bird, bug, or fish, especially if the organism is moving or in moving water. Some pitfalls of these photos that prevent positive ID include being blurry or out of focus, being too zoomed in or too zoomed out, showing multiple organisms, or not showing the organisms from multiple angles, such as only showing the top of that mushroom. To take useful ID photos, follow these guidelines. If you're moving a plant, be sure to leave the shoreline plants intact, and if you found something that you only see one of, definitely avoid pulling it out of the ground. Isolate the species in question if possible. Use a reference object such as your hand, a coin, or a key to illustrate scale. Use a solid color container such as a bucket to put your organism in, and add water if it's aquatic. Take multiple photos. Take whole organism photos and close-ups of key features like flowers, leaf venation, hairy stems or leaves, and undersides of shells or mushrooms. And use the notes box to provide context to a photo or explain what you see. All of these photos are in the clear, in focus, and ready to go for identification. You can also use field guides to comb through some species you might expect to see in your area or key them out with a dichotomous key. Here are a few we recommend as far as native and invasive plants go, but there are field guides out there for animals and specific groupings of plants too, whatever you're interested in, really. To dive deeper into invasive plant identification, visit LIISMA.org to download our new Emerging Invasive Species Guide. This one-page fact sheet points out our highest priority invasive plants that are new to Long Island, along with key ID tips for each. If you see them across your travels, please let us know by reporting them to iMap or iNaturalist so we can get started mapping them and potentially managing the population. For information on emerging and widespread invasive species and ID tips, check out the LIISMA website under species to explore invasives and even sort by tier. Now I'll hand it back to Melody.
Thanks, Cass. So now we're going to talk about reporting and mapping and how you can help to report and manage invasive species. So why do we map? Mapping is highly important for several reasons. We utilize mapping technology to alert the right people, like LIISMA and other governmental and non-governmental agencies and organizations, to new infestations and issues. Utilizing maps also helps to track or prevent outbreaks and detect invasive species patterns, such as vectors of introduction, methods of transport, and the distribution and abundance of those invasive species. Using maps is also a great way to keep track of your own observations to refer back to at your convenience. One of the best ways to map invasive species is through iMapInvasives. iMap is an online invasive species data management system and mobile app that is easily accessible and open for everyone to use. iMap assists professionals such as LIISMA and the DEC and citizen scientists to track invasive species. The common goal is to protect our natural resources from the threat of invasive species, and iMap helps us achieve this goal by providing a standardized, easy-to-use method of reporting invasives and sharing information. So creating an iMap account. Setting up an iMap account is quick and easy. Feel free to take a photo of these slides for later reference, or go to the iMap help page for instructions. To set up an account, go to NewYorkIMapInvasives.org and click Login. Below the login, you can create a new account by filling in your information and selecting your state for jurisdiction. Click Join, and you will get an email. Click the link in your email to obtain access and accept the user agreement. Now your account will be activated and you can log in and get started. So there are two different ways for reporting invasive species through iMap. These include the iMapInvasives mobile app and the Survey 123 for iMapInvasives. The iMapInvasives mobile app reports species as points and is quick and easy to use. The Survey 123 mobile app reports species as points, lines, or polygons. And you're able to also record treatment records. Survey 123 for iMapInvasives is more advanced, but it's still a very streamlined and user-friendly process. Reporting species or treatment records on iMapInvasives is useful for professionals like LIISMA because it informs us as to where we should dedicate our efforts and our priorities for invasive species threats, and it helps us to keep up to date with land management happening in the LIISMA region. All right, well, I'm going to pass the mic back over to Cass to talk about the iMapInvasives mobile app now.
Thanks, Melody. Let's get into it. So iMap can be accessed on an internet browser or by downloading the app so you can easily access it in the field. Search for the iMapInvasives app on the App Store or Google Play. Once you install it and open the app, you'll see a list of preferences. Select the jurisdiction species list based on your appropriate region and log in using your same account information you created for the website login. Once you log in, click Retrieve iMap Lists. You should receive the message in green and click OK. Then allow iMap to access your device's location in order to let the app record GPS coordinates when collecting data. If you click Customize Species List, you can select species you expect to report, are interested in, or already familiar with. This will shorten the list, but you still can access the full list to report other species that are not on the customized list. You can also adjust picture quality, zoom, and other attributes if you'd like, but the default settings work well. Lastly, you can select your organization and projects, if any, that your observations are associated with by default. You can enter organization and project affiliations manually after entering an observation as well. Now you're ready to map invasive species. Click Save and get started. To submit an observation on iMap, click Add Observation on the top right of the home screen. From here, you can either take a photo or access your photo library. You can enable a custom species list here if you like, and choose a species from the custom or full list. Then select whether the species was detected or not detected. Don't skip submitting observations for not detected species. This is still very valuable information that informs where to dedicate management and survey efforts, or where not to dedicate efforts. For each entry, you'll also select the date and location. It automatically uses your current location, but you can manually change this. If location shows does not equal 00, then location services are working and it was able to tag the location of the observation. As previously mentioned, you can also select organization and project at this step if you haven't already, enter minutes spent searching, and fill in any other notes or comments that might be useful. Finally, don't forget to click Save to save your record and complete your observation. There are even more features to explore online on iMapInvasives. Here you can view observations across the region, filter for one or several species of interest, submit observations and treatment records in the form of points, lines, or polygons, and generate or print reports for the areas you're interested in. There are many ways to use iMap and mold it to your needs, while also contributing to a wide network of invasive species records to inform and aid professionals in collaborative management efforts. Now I'll hand it back to Abby to dive into Survey 123.
Thanks, Cassidy. I'm Abby. I'm the Conservation Area Manager. And as mentioned before, Survey 123 is a little bit more of an advanced way to submit the same data to iMapInvasives. So Survey 123 connects to iMapInvasives, and it's really great if you want to have more detailed observations. It's also very easy to use on your phone, on a mobile device. With this app, you're able to make observations that are points, lines, or polygons, which might be helpful for you if you are in a large area or your infestation is large. You really want to know the area and size of it and how it changes over time. You could also put in treatment records in Survey 123 to track your management and the maybe initial treatment and follow-up treatments, and to track your management in general to see the progress of your project. So to use Survey 123, this is a different app, also free, and it's Esri Survey 123 app. That's what the icon looks like from your phone's app store. And once it's downloaded, you would import the iMapInvasive survey onto this Survey 123 app. It might, the Survey 123 app might prompt you to have an account, but you could actually bypass that. You don't need an ArcGIS Online account in order to use this. You just need the iMapInvasives account that you made before. And that QR code, it'll be here for all the slides if you'd like to download that Survey 123 iMap survey. The QR code is the same on all the slides. So we'll go into a live demo of this in a moment. Can you go back a second? The last slide, yes. So we'll do a live demo in a moment, but I'll go through what some of the questions are that it will ask in the survey. The first thing are general questions like observation about you, information about you as an observer. So it asks for your iMapInvasives ID number if you know it, but if you don't, then you can just enter your name and email address. Then it will also ask things like the observation date, which automatically sets to the day you're making the observation. And you need to put in your state, which would be New York. Once you put in that basic information in, the rest of the survey is unlocked. And to save time, there's also a way to set these answers as your favorite answer. So if you're making a lot of observations, you don't need to put this information over again and again and again. So we'll go over that. Now, once you've put in that basic information, there's actually two different ways that you could enter the rest of the information in this app. You could just do a simple data collection, which is a lot like the previous app that Cassidy was mentioning. That's for putting in a point, you want to do it quickly. And you could also put in things like treatment records around that point. But that's like the quick way to put in data. If you have a little bit more advanced data that you want to collect, like say you want to map a polygon of the infested area or a line or points or all of the above, you might want the advanced data collection option. So this is a choice that you can make, and both are pretty similar, but one might be a little bit faster. Now, for entering the data, these are some of the fields that might come up. There would be the searched area. So that is always the first step, and that's telling the survey where you searched, where you were looking for the species. It was along a trail. They ask you to make a polygon in the advanced version, and that tells the survey where you were looking. Then there's also the presence, point, line, or polygon, and that would say you're telling the survey where you found the invasive species. Then you need to tell the survey what that species was to the best of your ability. And then you could also put in a not detected species. So say you were in a searched area and you were looking for bittersweet vine, but you didn't see any. That could be important information for you as manager or for others to know. And so a not detected species could be just as important data as a detected species. Along with that goes photos, comments, the number of species found, the evaluation type, any follow-up notes you want to put in there, and also the impact of that invasive species on that site. Now, if you'd like to enter a treatment record, these are some of the fields that would come up. Defining the treatment area is kind of like that searched area. You're putting a polygon around where you controlled that invasive species. And then you also want to say what species you controlled. So maybe it was bittersweet vine. You want to put that in. And then some other data that goes along with it are the date, the treatment iteration, whether it's your first treatment or a follow-up, the goals of it, whether that's eradication or suppression and the like, other comments, rare species precautions, permits, and treatment type. And I want to say, I say supplemental data, these are not all required. I mean, some of them, like the date, you should put in, but you fill it out as extensively as you can. But if there are some that you need to skip, that the survey will still be able to be put in. And for finishing the survey, you can always come back to it later and save it in your drafts if you can't complete it in the moment. But if you are finished, clicking the check mark will trigger the survey to check if you missed any fields and ask you to fill them in. Also, if you don't have Wi-Fi, it's not a problem because the finished survey can stay in your outbox, on your phone for a later upload. And when you're back in the office or in Wi-Fi, you can send that to iMapInvasives. And where does it go? Well, in about an hour, your data will be online in the iMapInvasives website as an unconfirmed record. Pretty much for all of these observations that you'll put in, whether it's through the basic IMAP app or this app, they go in originally as unconfirmed, and people like us who are iMapInvasives confirmers can review the unconfirmed data and rely heavily on the pictures that you put in to say, yes, that is bittersweet vine, or yes, that is spotted lanternfly. And so once that step is taken, then those confirmed observations are there for everyone in the public to see. So with that, we'll do a live demo of Survey 123. And if there's any time or any questions that come up, we could even do live demos of the other things we discussed too. So I'm going to share from my phone. Bear with me.
Your phone, yeah.
You guys all see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the Survey 123 app. You won't have this many surveys. I'm just crazy. So you'd be clicking on this one that says iMapInvasives Survey 123 app. And by clicking the collect button, that opens up the survey. So the first question, again, it asks for your iMapInvasives ID if you know it. To get that, you'd make your account and go to iMapInvasives online. And there are instructions here, person ID help. Pretty much throughout this survey, you'll see that they put in a lot of help tools for any question you might have. But we'll just go with saying, no, we don't know the account, the number. So then you would just fill in your name. That's my email address. And I'm filling this in because it won't let me advance the survey until I put this information in. If you have any of this information, you can put it in, but if not, don't worry about the project ID. It sets the date to today. And last, the essential tool is putting in the state. So now it'll let me continue. And at this point, I'd like, because say this is my first time filling this in, I would like to put in that these are my favorite answers. If my phone would let me. Okay, I can't scroll up and do that, but there should be a box in the upper right corner that I could set these in as my favorite answers. My phone is getting stuck right now. I think maybe because I'm screen sharing. Okay, so we've put in our state. This is a help box for that favorites feature that I just mentioned. So it gives you some instructions if you'd like to set up those favorites, favorite answers at that point. Now we get that decision if we want to do a simple tool, a simple data collection or an advanced data collection. So let's start with simple. And basically, this is the part where you'd put down the point of where your invasive species is. So we click on this little like crosshairs button, and it's going to put it where I am right now. If I want to adjust that in any way, I would click on that map, and I could drag this, say it's actually over here in this pond. And that's where, and I click the checkbox, and I've adjusted where that species is. It wants you just to confirm that. That's what the little warning box is. It put it in the place where you intend it to be. Now we would have to say what that species is. Again, because we're doing that simple data entry, it's automatically saying our searched area is some kind of radius around where we put that point. But let's put in a presence record, tell it what the species is, and we'll today just do a fake species for testing. Now, there are some important information you want to tell the survey about the species that you just found. It asks for some photos. So a close-up photo, a general photo, a photo of the infestation, the time search that took you to look at this, any other comments you have, the number found, the evaluation type, you just found this by accident, or if you were actually going out to search for it, if there's any follow-up that you think should happen, the impacts that it has, and then some things for biocontrol, which you probably won't have to worry about. If you put in a plant, there's also some other fields that pop up that might be useful if it's the distribution of it, trace, sparse, dense, monoculture, or scattered, the percentage cover that it takes up, the life stage or phenology that it's in, woody plants, the age, if applicable, and if it's an intentional planting, if something you planted or you see in a park and you think somebody else planted it, but it's an invasive species, unfortunately, that's really good to know. So again, not all of those fields are mandatory every time, but as much information as you can fill out is obviously helpful. Now, let's say you were at one point and you saw multiple invasive species at the same point. Here, you could add an additional species. So if we just add the plus button, at the same point, we also saw alligator weed. We could put that in and then fill in the information for that species. So it's possible to do multiple species at one point, which does happen a lot here on Long Island. And again, these are the same fields from before. I wanted to take 1 second to go back and show what it's like in the advanced data entry, if anybody would like to put in points, lines, or polygons to map their invasive species. And here you can see it's already started to be a little different. They want you to make a polygon to show your searched area. So we could do that. We click on that little map button, and we click on in the lower left corner to make a polygon. So let's say we were over here in Hewlett Bay Park. I've just kind of tapped on the screen and was able to draw this polygon. You could edit these things, edit any point. And then when that polygon looks good to you, you would just hit the lower right corner check mark. And that looks like a good polygon to me. I can give you some measurements of it, which could be helpful for your data tracking. And it wants you to add in some things about that searched area. So if there's a site name, if there's disturbance there, if there's native vegetation, the landscape type, and other things about maybe how you sampled. Again, lots of options. As much as you could fill out is great, but it's not that every single thing is needed. And following that, now you're telling it, okay, here are the species that I found. So you could choose between a point, line, or a polygon. Let's do a polygon just to show what that would look like. So you could just say where this presence is in the whole area that I searched, and then it would just take the polygon you already put in, so you don't need to draw it twice. But let's just say it's a smaller area within the searched area that I just made. And then we would just make another polygon. So I think we were right around here. That's kind of big, but let's say that's where it is, and that was where our fake species was located. And then again, we would go through putting in a present species, which is the steps that we already went through. And they ask for photos, the name of the species, and the like. So that's great. Last thing we want to check out, I'll just go through this quickly, is a treatment record. So for treatments, you could use the entire searched area for the treatment record. So you treat it in that whole area. That would be a quick way to do it. Otherwise, you would put in a treatment polygon to say this was the area that we treated. And you would put in the species that you treated. Also the date, if it's the follow-up or initial treatment, the treatment goals, comments, and the treatment type. So I'm just going to X that out because I know it'll have some errors if I didn't fill that out completely. So let's say we've done our whole survey, we put in the searched area, we put in our present species, our points, lines, and polygons. This time we didn't put in a treatment. So we're going to hit that check mark in the lower right-hand corner. And we could either hit send now. I'm in Wi-Fi, so that's all good. We can send it right now. If you accidentally hit the check mark too early, which I do all the time, you'd want to hit continue this survey. And otherwise, you could just do save and outbox. When you come back to your office or wherever you are, you could click that outbox, it'll pop up. And I have two surveys, one for my practice on and this one today. And then you would just hit send in the lower right-hand corner. And in about an hour, it'll appear on IMAP. And that data is there for you to reference and for anything else that you need. So that's it for survey 123. And yeah, I will stop sharing. Maybe. Phil, do you want to share the slides again? Or
Can you-
I want them too.
It should be sharing. Hopefully you can see it.
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, interesting. I don't.
Melody or Cassidy, do you see the slide?
I see it on
Yeah,
my
I
phone,
see
so it's
it.
probably me. Okay,
Yes.
so our last slide. Our last slide here is there's always more iMapInvasives resources that you could use. That would be on the New York NYHP.org iMapInvasives help resources. And in that, there's so many tools in the iMapInvasives universe. So this has a whole library, whether it's PDFs, other recordings, especially if you're new to IMAP, they have just a quick button. You can say great resources for beginners, and that is going to help you in that endeavor. And thank you. If anybody has any questions, we could go over anything you'd like.
Thanks, Abby. While we're waiting for questions, I suppose people could put a question in the chat, or we could. It's a small group, right? We could probably put people on, or just put a question in the chat. Maybe that's easiest. But I just wanted to do a quick review and team jump in if I miss anything, because there's a lot of information there. Might be a little overwhelming. There's essentially 3 ways to record observations. All of them are very important to us, to resource managers and professionals who are trying to protect Long Island's biodiversity. So each one is important. We use all of them. We refer to all of them. iNaturalist is probably the easiest if you just want to point your camera, your cell phone camera on a plant or an animal, take a picture of it and upload it. It will tell you what you're looking at if you don't know, what kind of plant, what kind of butterfly, any kind of an animal. iNaturalist will tell you what you're looking at. And if it's an invasive species, we'll find it there on iNaturalist. If you want to go a little more involved, but it's still fairly easy, iMapInvasives, where you just need to put in a point and enter the name of the invasive species you're looking at. You can use, if you're not sure what species it is, or if it's something strange that you've never seen before, you can use iNaturalist or one of the other guides that Cass mentioned to help you identify it. So you have iNaturalist, you have iMapInvasives, and if you want to go a little further and record points and polygons and lines, and also record treatment methods, which is really important. There's resource managers have been treating invasive species for many years on Long Island, and some of the records are lost, or they're paper records in a box in a basement somewhere, and it's difficult for us to know what's been done before. So if you work for any kind of an organization, or even just on your own, or if you're a volunteer for an organization, recording treatments is very helpful if you can go that far. So those are the three methods. It's up to you, from the most simple to the more advanced. All of them are useful to us. Any questions?
That's a great summary.
I think this is a small enough group where people can ask questions out loud if they want, right?
Sure. Yeah. So, how can we do that? Do unmute people, or can people unmute themselves?
I think Desiree just unmuted herself.
Hi, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. And it really was. I think now I've got the fundamentals to start using it. I think this is really something that you have to get into and start using it practically. And then I know that I can ask as if I get stuck, I can email you. I know I will get the answer, or use the resources that you provided. So once again, thank you so much. This is an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Desiree.
Desiree.
And it will be posted on our YouTube site, so people can watch it again if you missed anything.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hey, it's Beth Sutherland.
Hi,
Do
Bob.
you want people to map both private and public spaces?
I think
That's a-
something that's helpful for private spaces, if you have like iNaturalist, is to mention whether it's a private or public space, because we don't typically do much work on private spaces. So it helps us to be able to understand the difference. What were you gonna say, Bill?
Well, yeah, that's correct. There's a spot also to say if a plant is in cultivation or not. There's a little checkbox. That's on iNaturalist. Not sure about iMap.
That
And
I've
is it-
seen in iNaturalist. I haven't seen the public versus private on iNaturalist.
There you
Although
go.
there's obscure versus be
Yeah,
specific.
team. So yeah, that's good, Beth. Someone on our team want to explain how you can obscure locations if you're concerned about that? Abby or Melody or Cassidy? You can probably explain it better than me. There's a way to do that, right? On
I
iMap?
know there's a feature in making an iNaturalist observation. I think it's all the way at the bottom right before you'd hit submit, where you could obscure the location. You could remove the location entirely, or you could obscure it, and it kind of makes it like a big polygon. It could be anywhere in a 5-mile radius. So that might be helpful if you have a sensitive species that you don't want people to come and take, if it's a rare species you're reporting on iNaturalist, or if you just don't want people to say, oh, it's in that backyard.
Yes.
And then, sorry, I have another question. So I'm with Rewild Long Island, and we are going to start another Rewild native plant garden at a historical site. It does have knotweed on it. Do I set up a project for that site? to track how we're gonna manage the knotweed there?
On iMapInvasives, the projects are mostly useful if you are maybe like working with a group and from a bunch of different accounts and they're all submitting data into one thing. If it's just like one person taking data on their phone, I don't think you would really need that extra step of creating a project.
Mhm.
But it is useful if you have multiple phones, multiple accounts, then people could select a project and then one person could say, oh, here's all that data that everybody put in for that one site.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hoping it's gonna be that. So,
Cool.
yes.
I think also too, if you're reporting a species on a private site on iNaturalist, it's definitely helpful in like the notes section before you post everything to just specify whether it's in cultivation, meaning like that it's
Yeah.
controlled and it's in a garden, versus it's escaping the property or something like that. It's helpful to like include notes like that for us, just so that we have an idea. Obviously, if it's a private site, that would be privately managed most of the time, which is fine. And you can always feel free to reach out to us if you need any like tips or advice on how to manage like maybe a newer species, because it could be a newly emerging species. And we might be able to, provide more information on that, because we do, even if those newly emerging species are popping up on private lands, it is helpful for us to know about them, and to know that you are controlling them, and keeping them from escaping that cultivated area. Oftentimes, a lot of these newer emerging species are horticultural plants that were very popular in the industry and sold, and so it's just helpful for us to know whether or not they're growing in a garden or not, and whether or not they're being actively managed.
Thanks, Melody. And I see that Cassidy put a link to our YouTube page in the chat, if anyone wants to go there. Any other questions? And if you think of a question after we're done, please feel free to email us at invasive@lisma.org. And we'll get right back to you. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Hi, Desiree. Great job, by the way.
Yes, thank you, Desiree. Yes.
You guys are just amazing. Thank you so for all that you do, and I'm so glad that I feel that you guys have you're beyond helpful. You're making a real difference, and you've really helped me. So whatever success I have, I owe it to you. The information you've put out there has been absolutely instrumental. Thank you.
Thank you. And we appreciate your help also. We can't do what we do without your help and others. So thank you.
Yeah, Bill, you should have seen the great work they were doing at Conjure Hall. It's really amazing. And also, Desiree should be the LIISMA spokesperson.
I love LIISMA. I love
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.